screen is yours. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colin. I'm truly honored to be with you today, and I hope that soon enough we'll be able to meet and to see you again on Israel's northern borders and traveling in Israel. Maybe in Australia, I don't know. By the way, Alma Center is named after my little girl, Alma, that was born at the same time when I left the army and was looking for a nice name, if you asked yourself. But yes, we are focusing on Israel's security challenges on the northern border. And I can say that today the situation is very different from the way it used to be when I've just started. I think that back then, around 6 years ago, I didn't I couldn't imagine the scale of control that Iran will gain on both these borders. We still had questions about the strength of Hezbollah. In Syria, it was a civil war that we didn't know exactly where this is heading. And today, the situation is that we are actually facing Iran on both of these borders. And I want to do today a very short overview because, you know, I can talk for hours about this topic and to give you some sense about what we are facing and how this is challenging our security here. And of course, you know, as a statement, it's clear to me as an ex-personnel in the IDF that Israel will survive a war. Israel will survive a Hezbollah attack. We are here to stay and we don't have any other option. But I am not discussing whether we will survive. I want to discuss the prices. I want to discuss the challenges and the problems, though I know that IDF, as we speak, is protecting us and doing a lot of efforts to do what is needed. And I want to start with photo number 1, which is something that happened a month and a half ago while Hezbollah created a few holes in the fence. Ariel, I would appreciate if you share the photo with us. A few holes in the fence in 3 different places which are not close to each other. It was like Shabbat dinner, and people were at home. There are many people that are living very close to the border, and Hezbollah, no, this is number 2. Hezbollah wanted to create a provocation along the border with Israel, and actually to show to the IDF, to the Israelis, that it can create holes in the fence as a retaliation to a message that actually IDF sent to Hezbollah the day before while attacking a Hezbollah vehicle next to the Syria and Lebanese border without killing anybody. This is just a taste, first, to the potential of escalation, while Hezbollah can reach to the fence of the border, get in, and very easily create holes and put some items on the Israeli side. And it's also a taste to the language, to understand the language that Israel and Hezbollah are like speaking with each other with no words, language of messages, of deterring messages, which is, by the way, the key to keep it silent over here, that each of us are sending to each other. But this photo also leads me to say a few words about the first challenge that I want to talk about, what we call a Hezbollah offensive plan, which is either above the ground or below the ground. It doesn't really matter. And I've started with discussing the changes that Hezbollah went through in the past years. Nobody imagined 10 years ago, 8 years ago, that Hezbollah will build operative plans to cross into Israel with big units. When I'm saying big units, okay, this is like, I don't know, brigades, try to take over areas next to the northern border. Today, this is something that everybody in the Israel security systems is relating to and preparing for. And we understand that Hezbollah was planning that, as I've said, above the ground or beneath the ground. Ariel, I would appreciate if you would just share with us the second photo of the tunnel. This is just an example. IDF found 6 border crossing, no, the previous one, 6 border crossing tunnels along the Israeli-Lebanese border in a few different places. While all these tunnels are located in areas that where Hezbollah went out, they could have seen communities. They could walk very quickly to the nearby communities or to isolate, to take over the road that leads to the community and isolate an Israeli community. You can see that the tunnels were dug in a very difficult place to excavate, meaning that the soil is rocky. It's a project of years and millions of dollars, about $5 million to each tunnel. The pipes that you see inside, other than the pipe, the yellow one, all other wires and pipes were put there by Hezbollah, which are electricity, phone lines, air condition. The stairs were made by Hezbollah. Actually, IDF didn't have to do anything to make, to change the tunnel. The white pipe over there is the way, it's like the needle that actually found the tunnel. IDF had to penetrate tons of white pipes like this again and again and again every few meters along the border in specific areas where it assessed that there may be tunnels. And this one, by the way, it took the IDF about 2 months to allocate. It's the deepest and longest. It's about a kilometer long and about 80 meters deep, which is, it's truly unbelievable. I don't know if you can experience what I'm experiencing each time that I'm talking about it, but it's truly an unbelievable project that for me, not only taught me about the operational logic of Hezbollah and how dedicated it is to its operational goals, but also how deep is the hate. And I always said that the hate is as deep as the tunnel. So along this offensive plan of Hezbollah to enter into the Galilee and try to take over communities, of course, everybody speak about the rockets. About 130,000 rockets are hidden in civilian infrastructure in Lebanon. About 40–50% of those are hidden in the UNIFIL area of operation, the UN area of operation in South Lebanon, and they can target almost everywhere in Israel. Just tonight, which probably you will be able to see tomorrow morning, we are having our live webinar about a special report that we are going to expose assets of Hezbollah in Beirut. That, it's an information that is usually not out there, usually for intelligence agencies, but we were lucky enough to trace it in the internet, and we are going to expose that tomorrow night. And this information that we have found exemplify very clearly how Hezbollah is using its population as human shield, because all these about 30 sites that we have found in Beirut are located inside a very crowded city, next to the airport, next to school, next to churches or a soccer playground. And Hezbollah is saying very clearly, its speakers are saying very clearly, the weapon, and I'm now quoting just an expression from last week, the weapon is inside the warehouses and the homes of everybody in Lebanon. Everybody knows that. End of quotation. I want to say one more word about that as a resident of the Galilee, not yet. In a minute, we'll get to Syria, Ariel. Before we go to Syria, just to say one word, I'm using a virtual screen behind me because I'm sitting in a very messy, small room, which is actually my shelter at home, about 2 square meters in the Galilee. I live about 9–10 kilometers from the border. Everybody in Israel that have a home that was built after 91, after the first Gulf War, has kind of a shelter like that with an iron door. And sometimes I don't have a window, but usually they also have iron windows, and the walls are concreted, and it's safe to stay in those rooms when you hear the sirens. The problem is, and I think I have the same problem as my friends in Gaza, my brothers in Gaza, that I have about 9 seconds to run for shelter, and it's definitely not enough with the 5 children. Another option is what IDF calls active defense, which is Iron Dome. That is a system that can intercept the rockets. We're very proud of it. There are high percentage of success to this system, but the problem is that the assessment are that when we speak about 130,000 artilleries, Iron Dome will probably not be enough to intercept all of those, and there will be damage in the next war for both sides, for the Israeli side because of the amount of rockets, and for the Lebanese side because of the fact that Hezbollah is using its population as human shield. Now let's travel to Syria and take a look how all of that connected. And I want to say one statement before we start is that everything that happened in Syria in the past few years, although it was supposed like to, it was supposed to overthrow Assad. It was a civil war. Everybody thought that maybe it will bring a change. Eventually, the winners of this war are not the rebels in Syria. The winners of this war are the Shiite side, what we call the Shiite axis, Hezbollah, Iran, and those who came to help, which are the Russians. And actually, it was important for me to show you this very complicated map, because that way you can understand that Syria is actually divided to areas of influence, while the biggest one in pink, it's supposed to be the area under the control of the government, but actually, this is the area that is under the control of the government and its allies, which is Hezbollah on the Israeli-Syrian border, which is Iran, militias, other Iranian proxies and militias, and of course, Russian presence there as well. The orange area is an area under the control of the Kurds. The green, light green area is an area under control of what we used to call the rebels, but actually today these are Islamic groups that are connected to Turkey. And the blue area is an area that is under the control of specifically Turkey. And where you have a light blue area in the southern part of Syria and next to Jordan, this is an area that is actually still under control of the Americans. And this area is very important. Ariel, if you can share with us map number 3, everybody will be able to see these roads that are actually going all the way from Syria to Tehran, which is on the right side of the map. And this is what everybody calls the ground corridor. By the way, Alma is the only civilian organization that mapped the roads themselves. And we have seen that there are actually 3 routes that Iran could use, 3 existing routes. But while the northern one and the southern one are blocked either by the Kurds in the north and the Americans in the south, the Iranians are using the middle one, where it's written El Bukamal on the border crossing between Iraq and Syria, to transfer soldiers, to transfer ammunition. They've built a big base around El Bukamal. They put a lot of militias over there in El Bukamal. And I think this map exemplifies for us very clearly why this place is, Syria is so important for Iran, while it is the road to Lebanon. You have Iraq over there, where you have a majority of Shiite, in Iran. And that way, when they control Syria and they have these roads open, they control the whole area. And of course, they can threaten Israel as well. What's the good news? Of course, there are good news. And there are a lot of pressures in the past year and a half on Hezbollah, on Iran, with the sanctions, the corona, which was hardly appeared in the Middle East, the Arab Middle East, was very much present in Iran, and there were thousands of dead. There was a protest in Iran, in Lebanon, in Iraq, just before the corona, and now we see a renewal of this protest, at least in Lebanon. So there is a lot of pressure, but the option of escalation is always there, because Israel is attacking Iranian presence in Syria, or Hezbollah presence in Syria, and Hezbollah and Iran would want to retaliate without getting into war. And again, this language of deterring messages is going on. And that's why if one of these sides will be too successful, we may find ourselves in a situation that nobody actually wanted. You may ask yourself, how come that we are attacking, Israelis are attacking in Syria, but not attacking in Lebanon, though everything I've just said about what is happening in Lebanon with Hezbollah. And the reason is the issue of collateral damage. The reason is this like mutual deterrent that was created over here, and the understanding that if civilians will be hurt, this may take us into war. Now, I'll give you some inside information behind the scenes of this presentation. Just at the last moment, I sent Joel and Ariel some new photos of this morning, which are very good to explain a few things about what is happening over here. Ariel, I would appreciate if you would just put the number 5. And in number 5, you can see Hezbollah operatives in demonstrations that were held in some of the places in Lebanon. By the way, not too many in South Lebanon, not too many demonstrations. We thought we will see more for what we call the Day of the Withdrawal. 20 years, this week we mentioned 20 years for the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon. By the way, also in Alma Center, we made webinars about that, and we discussed that a lot. And in the other side in Lebanon, we expected to see celebrations, and we saw very little. But this was one of them that happened just this morning on our border, very close to where I live. And they are saluting in the Nazi style. I hope you can understand that, okay? What does that mean? Few things you can learn from how come Hezbollah is using its population to as human shield. What people are afraid, people are truly supporting Hezbollah, they are getting paid. What is exactly happening over there? And our understanding is that Hezbollah is fully interacted, engaged, and even controlling the everyday life of the people there. So you see many community events. You don't always see this kind of anti-Semitic event, but you do see a lot of community events that enable Hezbollah to indoctrinate its own narrative, which is hate to Israel and the West, martyrdom, Islamic revolution or Shiite values. And this is happening by a huge system, civilian wing, whatever you want to name it, that is actually the enabler for the military wing, because the mother knows that if she will refuse to Hezbollah to hide the rockets in her home, Hezbollah will not give her allowances, medical services in the Corona time, for example, food during the Corona, during the Ramadan, free study in Iran, summer school, women organizations, and more on top of all of that. So this photo was one example, but I want to show a short video as well from the same demonstration this morning. If you can put us number 6, please, because the first question I asked when I've started this project of Alma was, okay, what's the alternative? What can we do? What the Lebanese can do? And we knew that there is Hezbollah leading the Shiites, and there is another movement named Alma, which was also a political party, very strong in Lebanon. But when I see this demonstration here, you can see yellow flags of Hezbollah, and you can also see green flags, which are the green flags of Alma. And what you can learn from that, and of course there is a lot of information that supports that, is that they're coexisting. Maybe sometimes they're rivals, but actually they coexist. And this is not obvious. It was not the case in the past in Lebanon. In the past elections, by the way, 2 years ago, they ran together, Hezbollah and Amal. Bottom line, I'm going back to my initial statement. Iran is on our borders, and in the Middle East, it's very easy to understand what's the reality if you just look at what is happening on the ground. If you can share with us the 7th photo, you can see, the whole story in one picture, because you can see, and again, this is from this morning. next to the Israeli-Lebanese border. Demonstrations for this, the day of the withdrawal 20 years ago, and you can see a Palestinian flag there, Hezbollah flag, and 3 leaders, which 2 of them are Iranians, Abu el-Muhandis and Soleimani, that were assassinated in Iraq 6 months ago by the Americans. They were the commanders of the Iranian and Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. And the guy on the right with the black beard is Murnia, was a leading commander in Hezbollah, number 2 in Hezbollah, and he was assassinated in 2008. And the fact that these 3 are together in a poster next to the Israeli border in Lebanon with, by the way, I don't see a Lebanese flag here. For me, that tells the whole story of how they use or wave the flag of the Palestinian issue in order to promote the Iranian interest next to our border. I think I will end up with that, and now we can open it for questions.
Great, Toda. Thank you, Sarit, for that. I'll just wait for the spotlight to come on me. Thank you. I'll actually take liberty, if I can, of asking the first question. Now, given the situation with Hezbollah and the precarious situation that that exists on the border there, how likely do you think that Israel will come into a direct conflict with Hezbollah in the next couple of years? And what should friendly countries and allies of Israel, such as Australia, do to prevent it?
Nobody can anticipate when exactly the war will start, whether it would be tomorrow or, or it would be the next year, or it would be in 10 years. Nobody anticipated that in the end of the war in 2006, we will have 14 years without war on the northern border. So I can't know. I can speak about scenarios. So I've mentioned one scenario, which is the escalation option. And the other scenario is a scenario that will derive from a decision of Iran to carry out an attack against Israel. Maybe because of the nuclear issue, maybe because of issues in the Gulf, in the Arab Gulf, where they have conflicts with the Americans, maybe because of internal interests, but Iran may decide to give the order to Hezbollah to carry out an attack or carry out a terrorist attack in a specific place, which again will lead us to the scenario of an escalation. But the option exists every day.
And I just take it a little bit extra when it comes to Israel's allies. As you know, Australia only designates the external security organization of Hezbollah. You've briefed a number of Australian members of parliament, senior journalists, diplomats, clergy, students, advisors, you name it. We've sent them to Israel and they've met with you. What message, and well, how important is it that an ally like Australia can beef up its legislation, legal legislation and designation of an organization like Hezbollah to avoid or to assist in a conflict if it comes to a head?
As long as Australia and other countries are not designating the civilian wing of Hezbollah, they are enabling the military wing. And that way they are endangering not only the Lebanese and the Israelis, but also themselves, because eventually terror is terror is terror. And we are experienced with what we call terror attacks abroad of Hezbollah that planned almost everywhere in the world: Thailand, India, Azerbaijan, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Argentina. These are just the examples that come to my mind. Turkey. These, in the past years, that most of them were prevented. Germany now. Most of these attacks were prevented, and only in Bulgaria they succeeded. While we are enabling the Lebanese to support Hezbollah, and we are enabling the money to go to Hezbollah, we are endangering not only the Israelis. Again, it's a danger for everybody else. And I think this is, I must say, Joel, one more sentence. This is why I founded Alma. I founded Alma because I believe, or I feel that when people are discussing the Middle East security, they mainly discuss the Israeli-Palestinian issue. But while I'm living here in the north, and I've been a researcher of this area in the past, I don't know, at least 2 decades, I feel that the main issue is not the Palestinian issue. The main issue is radical Islam. It may be ISIS, which is Sunni, and it may be Iran, which is Shiite. That's the main issue. And if we are hiding behind, like it's a political movement, or it's a political party, or a social movement, we don't understand how these systems work. There is a synergy between this civilian wing and military wing. There is no, you cannot tear them apart. They are all connected to the same mind.
So thank you for that. Now, again, I forgot to explain to you how to raise the hand again. If in the participation list, which you'll be able to find at the bottom of your screen as a tab, if at the bottom of that participation list you will see a hands up icon, I will be able to see you and I will be able to call upon you. So I'm going to call on Ross Babbage to ask the next question. Ross.
Thanks very much, and Sarit, thank you very much for the opening presentation and coverage of many of the key issues. I wonder if you could just give us a bit more detail and talk a little bit about the range of weaponry and systems that have been transferred by the Iranians into that theatre. The things that you really worry most about. You talked a lot about the problems of deployment and stationing of military capabilities in amongst the civilian population, and the obvious problems that arises for collateral damage and all the rest of it in future operations. I just wonder if you can just give us a clearer sense of what's happened in recent times with what they've transferred in, and what worries you most.
Okay, these are a few questions in the same question. The ranges of these rockets can cover almost all of Israel, meaning with various kinds of artillery, beginning with mortars and missiles and everything in between, what we call short range, medium range, etc. And we knew during the years that Hezbollah is holding thousands of these kind of rockets. But what happened in the past, I think, year and a half, is that Hezbollah and Iran decided to make these rockets accurate, which this is a game changer. This is completely different, because we have known during the years that if they will launch a lot of rockets, the Iron Dome will have to deal only with very few that may endanger our population, and all the rest may fall in open areas, and we can have like a situation assessment all the time. But when these rockets are accurate, this is a completely different threat. And Nasrallah, in one of his interviews, presented a map and said very clearly, we are targeting all the civilian infrastructure of Israel, which is the water plants, desalination infrastructure, electricity, airport, Knesset, etc., and populated areas as well. And today, the assessments are that IDF succeeded in preventing what they call the project of the PGM, the project of precision-guided rockets, but they didn't prevent completely the fact that Hezbollah may be holding a few tens or a few hundreds of these kind of rockets, which are more accurate. It's not easy to make the rockets accurate. It needed a sophisticated process to do so, and it takes a while. But again, for me as a resident of the Galilee, this is a problem, and that's why it's important for me to preemptively walk around that and not to wait to the time when there will be war and then we will have to deal with that.
Thank you, Sarit. I'll go to Aaron Shapiro for the next question.
Yes. Hi, Sarit. It's good to see you again. I wanted to ask you about Naftali Bennett. Now that he's departed the position of defense minister, he had a very short time there, but he did try to do a lot. I know he claims to have tried to do a lot, especially regarding Iran and Syria. And he did claim at the end of his tenure that there was some movement of Iran out of Syria. Have you seen anything that would evidence that? And in general, how would you typify, how would you sum up the Bennett period? And also now looking at the new defense ministry, what do you see, and do you foresee any major changes in the northern border dealing with the defense ministry?
Regarding to the northern border, I didn't see Bennett changing the Israeli policy with what we call the campaign of the gray zone, okay, which is the campaign between the wars and the fact that we are trying to defend ourselves and to prevent all this military infrastructure of Iran in Syria without getting into war. I think these principles were the same principles in all the defense ministers along the past years. When we saw these publications about Iran leaving Syria, the first sentence we've said in Alma is, don't hold your breath. And Nasrallah himself talked about it in his recent speech, and he said very clearly, the Iranians may change some of the way they are deployed in Syria, and you must understand, it's not Iranians that are deployed in Syria, it's Iranians proxies that are deployed in Syria. It doesn't cost Iranian blood, okay? It's not Persian speakers. It's only, and Nasrallah said, it's advisors, which it's the civilian word to commanders, actually commanders of units. And the main one is Hezbollah. This is the most professional one, and I don't see them leaving yet. Actually, what Hezbollah has done is to create 2 specific units that will take over the border between Israel and Syria, the area of what we call the Syria and Golan. One unit is a company to the Syrian army, and it is helping with rebuilding it and training it and preparing the ground to be capable of dealing with Israel in future war operationally. And the other unit, which called the Golan Portfolio, and IDF exposed this unit, is a unit that is dealing with planning terrorist attacks that will be prepared and in times of order, and they already tried a few times to do that, launch rockets and snipers, and try to launch drones. So it happens a few times. So Hezbollah is definitely there. If there are changes in the Iranian deployment, that could be, and I believe this is what Bennett was trying to say. And these changes are almost natural because you see the map of Syria. There is only very little area which is still under the control of, again, what we used to call the rebels, but actually it's Islamic groups. And most of Syria is under the control of the Syrian government and its allies. And now the Iranians needs to decide where they want to put the money, where they want to be deployed, whether it's in the Israeli-Syrian border, whether it's on the seaports, and other places are less needed. What was misleading, I think, is that people saw that there was some reducing the amount of flights, but Nasrallah said it, and I believe him, though he's truly a great liar, but in this respect, I believe him, that there was a reduction of the flights because the airplanes were used for shipments for the Corona issue. And as I've said, Iran suffered greatly from the Corona issue. And the flights continued, they never stopped. They were just reducing the amount of the flights. So don't hold your breath.
Thank you for that, Sarit. I'll hand over now to Anthony Cohen to ask the next question.
Thank you, Sarit, for your clear comments. About a year ago, there was Shurat Hadin held a conference with many experts from all over the world, including Alan Dershowitz. And from what I gather, there seemed to be a clear consensus that Israel has no option other than to act preemptively. Would you be prepared to comment about that?
I don't know what they meant, but when I think about other options, look, the issue of the gray zone, what I've mentioned, which is the campaign between the war, is composed of preemptive attacks, but also messages, okay, also deterring messages on the one hand, and diplomatic effort on the other hand. So I believe that if you want to have this kind of campaign, you cannot only just preemptively attack, you need a few more layers that will support it. And some of it is the diplomatic efforts, the relationship that we had developed with Russia, the efforts that we are doing in the UN to expose the Iranian presence in Syria, or the Hezbollah usage of human shield, the diplomatic efforts with the issue of the designation of the civilian wing, and of course the efforts to deter Hezbollah, which is part of the dialogue that we are having, the indirect dialogue that we are having with Hezbollah. I guess this is what they meant.
Now over to Oved Lobel.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Ask away.
Hi, Sarit. Thanks for doing this. I just want to know your view about the current economic collapse in Lebanon and Iran and its potential impact on Hezbollah. Do you see any serious problems developing for them?
Well, the economic problems of Hezbollah started 2 years ago with the sanctions. We have seen reorganization. We have seen cuts in the budgets. We have seen people in South Lebanon complaining that they are not getting any budgets for development, building schools, and supporting the population, etc. Though eventually they voted for Hezbollah in the elections. So yes, economic situation definitely influence what is happening. The problem is that we don't see that when we speak about rockets, when we speak about willingness of Hezbollah to compromise of issues that are concerning why there are sanctions, or why, now I forgot the term, the international currency, why isn't the international pressure when we speak about financial assistance to Lebanon? All this financial assistance comes with a lot of demands. And a lot of demands that Hezbollah is doing a lot of efforts that Lebanon government will refuse to these demands. So though there are a lot of pressures, Hezbollah is not backing off. It is not reaching its hand to peace yet. It's the same with Iran. There are a lot of pressures. The economic situation is a problem. People went out to the streets because of that in both of these countries, but it didn't make these regimes or these ideologies change their course. Joel, I have questions in the chat here. Do you want me to?
Yeah, so I'm going to get to both of them now. So I'm going to go to Dr. Run Porat to begin with. He'll ask his questions, and I'll hand over to Jeremy Samuel. He'll get his opportunity as well. So I'll hand over to Dr. Run Porat to ask his question.
Can you hear me?
Long time no see.
Shalom, Sarit. Great to see you. Listen, I just wanted to ask about UNIFIL, because reports are saying that UNIFIL actually is being mocked by Hezbollah, making a joke out of them. They're not actually useful, and their role is being constantly reviewed by the UN. What should be done with UNIFIL? Maybe should be replaced with something different, or what should be done with UNIFIL?
Well, you and me both know that it was a mistake. It was a mistake to make UNIFIL such a big force of 10,000 soldiers. In reality, they were supposed to be even bigger than that. In order to fulfill its mission, UNIFIL need to be willing to violently conflict with Hezbollah, which is not willing to do so. And each time UNIFIL is trying to insist on its mandate and to cross or enter to a Shiite town and something of the sort, it is getting beaten and attacked by Hezbollah, including yesterday, by the way, another incident in Bleidet. So I think that after 14 years since that war and this change in UNIFIL mandate, it is time for conclusions. And my conclusion is that we do need an international force on the border, because it is helpful when we speak about tactical issues on the border, and somebody to moderate a little bit and lower the flames a little bit. Again, it's not 100%, definitely not. But UNIFIL failed to prevent Hezbollah from rearming in South Lebanon, and that's why we don't need 10,000 soldiers there. It's a waste of money. That's my viewpoint.
Jeremy Samuel.
I'm unmuted. Correct.
Yeah, you're unmuted. Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarit. Fascinating and a little bit scary. It's asking me to put my video on. I'm in also a messy study, but hello, shalom, and thank you very much. And I guess my question is, without giving away confidential and classified information, Israel's not known for sitting back and sort of taking it on the chin. And you've outlined some of the measures that can be taken, but is Israel doing things like we see the Chinese and the Russians doing, with trying to get information and disinformation into their information channels? What are we hearing about military threats? And do you really think that the diplomatic activity is going to change or alter the course of anything that Iran or Hezbollah would be doing? Because they seem completely immune to any diplomatic efforts.
Of course, I can't answer to your first question. As to your second question, I believe that we are fighting an ideology. We are not fighting leaders. It's important to assassinate Soleimani, but it's not the solution. We are fighting an ideology, and to this specific ideology, in order to kill it, you need to use its own tools. And I have described here what's their tools, and it's not the missiles and the soldiers, it's the civilian system. That's the tools, and this is what we need to fight. On the one hand, we need to fight their tools to shut down all their civilian systems. And on the other hand, we should encourage Lebanese locals, not us, not Western people, but finance that, help this to happen, to establish alternatives, because in both of these countries, Lebanon and Iran, there is no alternative. Iran is an excellent example. The Iranian opposition is outside of Iran. And the second problem in Iran is that the Iranian army or the IRGC in Iran are completely subordinate and supportive of the government, of the Ayatollahs. But there is no alternative. And in Lebanon, it's clear. Amal became supporters or cooperative with Hezbollah. We need to help these Lebanese, and there are tons of opponents to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to help them develop civilian systems that can provide what Hezbollah is providing. The problem is that when I'm speaking about that, this is not a quick solution, and it's not an easy solution, and it's not even a cheap solution. It can take years.
I'll now hand over to Ajax, editor of the Australia-Israel Review, Dr. Zvi Fleischer.
Good evening. Thank you, Sarit. I wanted to ask a little bit about what's going on in southern Lebanon. We know Israel, when the regime wasn't in control of that area, Israel gave a lot of help and medical help and other help to the people of that area. Now that the regime is back in control, does Israel still have sort of good contacts or benefits from that area? Yeah. The second thing I wanted to ask about that area is Ehud Yaari, who we had a webinar with a few weeks ago, recently wrote about a coming explosion between the people of the area and the regime. Are you seeing signs of that? And what do you expect to happen if that does happen?
So all connections with the people in South Syria were completely disconnected the day the regime went back to this area. We don't know what happened to them. We don't know whether alive or dead. We assess that many of them were expelled, other than the 400 that we enabled them to cross into Israel and then go to Jordan. All this beautiful project of the good neighbor is completely ended. As for your second question about the Syrian government and how can we, I'm sorry, I lost you. Again, the second question.
The second question was about Ehud Yaari wrote a couple weeks ago that in the Der'a area there was a likely the people are becoming more resistant to the regime. They're not really under the control of the regime. There's likely to be an explosion of violence there sometime soon. Do you think that's going to happen, and what would be the effect if it did?
It is already happening. Last week, the Syrian army was sent to these areas to reinforce the control of the Syrian government there. What we see in Daraa are actually two trends. The one is from ISIS cells that are still existing there, and the other one is from ex-rebels that are still attacking here and there regime presence in the area, and then there is retaliation and there is a siege, and then again the rebels attack. And on top of all of that, of course, there is a very difficult economic situation in those areas. By the way, we wrote a few articles about that in Alma, so you can take a look at our website. But no doubt that southern Syria is an area that is very unstable until today. Bear in mind that Daraa was the first city where everything started with the graffiti of a few young people in 2011 against Assad.
Final question, we'll hand over to Jeremy Jones.
Thank you, Sarit. It's very good to hear from you and get an update like this. We discussed a little bit about what Australia might be able to do in terms of their attitude towards Hezbollah. And I wanted to press you a little bit about the question about Lebanon. Now, in Australia, there's a very large expatriate Lebanese community of very different backgrounds, Druze, different sorts of Christians, different sorts of Muslims. They're here in Australia. Many of them remember the good fence, as I remember the good fence. They remember a Lebanon fondly, which was relatively prosperous and peaceful, and want to know what they can do to rebuild again a better Lebanon and also a better relationship across borders from Lebanon. So I was wondering, what's your message, if you have a message, to the Lebanese in Australia and New Zealand and beyond, and others who really want to make for a better world? What should they be doing? What should be their priority now if they want to contribute to a future which is not all about warfare and conflict?
If they would not overthrow Hezbollah from the Lebanese government, today Hezbollah controls the Lebanese government. This is relatively new. They are losing their homeland. It's their interest to fight Hezbollah and to make sure that Lebanon will remain an independent country without the involvement of Iran, because Hezbollah is not taking care of the Lebanese interests, but for the Iranian interests. And that's why the Lebanese diaspora anywhere in the world, by the way, should support the opponents of Hezbollah in Lebanon and should help them organize against Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is the strongest organization today in Lebanon. And we've seen this even with fighting the corona virus. Hezbollah was the one who led the campaign with the supplying of food, medical services, nurses, doctors, explaining the population. He was there much more than the government.
Final question we'll have from Colin.
Thanks very much, Joel. And I'm just stepping in and to thank you very much, Sarit, for an excellent briefing. But a nightmare scenario, I believe, is if Iran's proxies, both in the north, in Lebanon and Syria, but also in Gaza, simultaneously undertake offensives against Israel. How would Israel cope with that scenario?
You are just bringing me back to the first sentence of the opening. Three fronts war is a great challenge to the IDF, but Israel will survive everything because we have no other choice. IDF is preparing also to this kind of scenario, no doubt about that.
And on that note, thank you so much, Sarit. It's so good to see you. It's nice that you get to meet our Australian audience as well, because so many people have heard about you from our returning guests. So it's fantastic to have you to share your insights with our audience tonight. And I wanted to thank you very much. To our audience, please look out for your reminder email tomorrow morning of the webinar with Use of Color, which will be at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow morning. And then Eran Lerman will be on Wednesday evening, June 3rd at 7:30. Look out for the invitation. That's all for us tonight. Toda, Sarit, thank you very much. Everyone else, stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll be in touch with you very soon. Laila Tov, have a lovely night.